Once again, I'm talking about a game I knew nothing about before randomly discovering it on Game Pass. The more I think about it, the more I realise Game Pass is actually such a good way to discover games. The sheer amount of games I have played that I never usually would have is pretty crazy, really. Anyway, Fogpiercer. The little thumbnail on Game Pass immediately caught my attention. As you can see, there's a train. That's a good start. There are also multiple explosions. That is an even better start. But more than that, the art style caught my eye the most. I liked the bold colours and the visual style of the characters on there. For all I knew, this could have been an extremely aggressive public transport simulator. But surprisingly, it is not. It's actually a turn-based roguelike deck builder where you control a train travelling through a post-apocalyptic world. I don't know exactly why, but turn-based action games have always piqued my interest. I'm not particularly amazing at them, and I haven't played a massive number, but XCOM, for example, is awesome, and Gears Tactics, the turn-based Gears of War game, was actually pretty sick. There's just something uniquely satisfying about spending several minutes carefully planning the perfect tactical move, only to miss an enemy standing 4 feet in front of you. But thankfully, Fogpiercer doesn't have that problem because this game isn't all about luck in the same way those games are. Your luck here comes from pulling random cards out of a deck, rather than a 20% chance to miss a target. Or, if you're playing XCOM, a 20% chance that is secretly a 90% chance. Fogpiercer's central premise is that you play as the conductor of a heavily armoured train travelling through a ruined, post-apocalyptic world. Humanity needs somewhere new to live, and you have been tasked with piercing the fog wall and locating a safe haven. Hence the name. Naturally, you cannot simply enjoy a peaceful little train journey through the apocalypse. The wasteland is filled with bandits who repeatedly attack your locomotive because they want your resources, or your scrap. Or perhaps they experience an uncontrollable desire to shoot at public transport. Who are we to question the motives of a bandit? Either way, you must protect this train, improve it in between battles, build a deck of abilities, and survive long enough to break through the fog. Like I mentioned, the game is also a roguelike, meaning each attempt sends you through a sequence of encounters where you collect upgrades, modify your deck, and gradually transform your train from an ordinary locomotive into Thomas the Thermonuclear Warhead. Starting a run works roughly how you would expect from a roguelike deck builder. You're presented with a large map divided into several different zones. You choose where you want to begin, and then plan a route through a branching collection of battles, shops, safe areas, and other encounters. So, you're not only choosing the general area you want to explore, you also need to examine the individual nodes inside it and decide how dangerous you want the journey to become. You can take the sensible route, carefully managing your health and resources, or you can deliberately steer towards every difficult encounter because apparently your relaxing evening requires more suffering. Although you will get more rewards for doing so. So I guess there's method in your madness. Once combat begins, Fogpiercer initially looks like a relatively traditional deck building game. At the beginning of each turn, you receive a random selection of cards and must figure out how to best use them before the round ends. Each card costs AP, action points, and once those points are gone, your turn is effectively finished. But certain cards can change as the round progresses. The shield card, for example, normally costs 1 AP and gives one of your train carriages a temporary shield capable of blocking a single point of damage. However, towards the end of the round, that card can become completely free. So, instead of immediately spending your AP on protection, you can sometimes hold off, complete the rest of your turn, and then deploy the shield without spending anything. It's a small mechanic, but it means you're not only thinking about which cards to play, you're also thinking about the order in which you want to use them and how their value might change before the turn ends. Although, the most interesting part of Fogpiercer's combat isn't necessarily the cards, it's your main weapon, the mortar. This beautiful piece of machinery doesn't simply damage whatever you fire it at. The explosion also forces nearby enemy vehicles to move. Land the shell in front of an enemy and it will retreat. Place it behind them and you can push them forwards. You can also do it diagonally. So depending on where the explosion lands, you can effectively bully an enemy vehicle into whatever position benefits you the most. And this is incredibly useful considering two vehicles cannot occupy the same space. So, if an enemy is forced into another car, both vehicles take damage. And this means one well-placed mortar shell can damage its original target, force it into another vehicle, damage them both, and push that second vehicle somewhere else and potentially trigger another collision. One shell can result in half the battlefield swerving and crashing like drunk drivers at 3 AM. Of course, this system can also work against you. An enemy might avoid the mortar explosion, but get pushed directly into one of your own train carriages, damaging both vehicles in the process. However, this is where the shield becomes even more useful. If the protected carriage is hit, the shield absorbs your side of the collision, while the enemy still takes damage. Your train can move forwards and backwards along the track, allowing you to avoid incoming attacks, adjust your positioning, or launch several tons of reinforced fuckage directly into another vehicle. Thank you for your continued support in my own efforts to destroy you. Not only this, but if you destroy a car, that car has to go somewhere. So, any cars behind the one you just destroyed will also take damage. This movement system was also the reason why my first run ended. Because when I first started, my strategy was attack first, question why I failed later. I didn't yet understand how valuable it could be to simply move the train instead of using an offensive card. Avoiding an incoming shot, repositioning for the next turn, or setting up a future collision can be far more useful than dealing a small amount of immediate damage. But my brain had already categorized movement as the thing you do when you cannot attack, rather than an attack in its own right. It took being violently dismantled by several Frozen Land motorists for me to reconsider. Your conductor also possesses a separate collection of special cards. As you perform actions, your special meter gradually fills, eventually allowing you to deploy one of these more powerful abilities. For example, your first character has a focus on freezing/stunning enemies. Different conductors apparently have their own cards and playstyles, but I haven't unlocked another one yet. Doing that requires completing an entire 4-zone expedition and defeating the major boss waiting for you at the end. So, for the moment, the other conductors remain locked behind the minor inconvenience of me needing to become good at the game. The train itself can also expand and rearrange during its run. Whenever you reach a chop shop or a save point, you can purchase new carriages and change their position within the convoy. The engine obviously needs to remain at the front, but everything else can be moved around. But carriage placement matters. The shield carriage, for example, can only generate shields for the 2 train cars directly beside it. That means placing it in the correct position allows it to protect your most valuable equipment, including the main engine. However, add another carriage and move your shield generator further down the train, and it may no longer be able to protect that engine. Yeah, you might technically have made the train bigger and more powerful, but you've also moved its only protection meters away from the part that absolutely cannot explode. If one of the secondary carriages loses all its health though, it becomes broken and stops functioning. Provided you finish the battle before it's hit again, you can repair it when you reach a safe area. But if an enemy attacks that broken carriage one more time, it is completely destroyed. Your main engine does not receive the same generosity though. If that is destroyed, the entire run ends. So, every battle becomes a balancing act between protecting your engine, keeping the weapon carriages operational, and deciding whether a damaged section of the train is worth risking for another turn. The cards themselves are divided into several general categories. You have offensive cards, support cards, and the useless yellow cards. What are the yellow cards? Well, those appear to be the cards designed for intelligent people. They're not actually useless, I'm just exaggerating. But I simply haven't yet developed the additional brain tissue required to understand why most of them are useful. If I know games like this, then this card will actually be extremely powerful if it's in the hands of someone competent. Unfortunately, it doesn't contain the words damage, shield, or make car explode, so I'm currently unable to process it. As far as the enemies go, the roster I've encountered so far is entirely vehicle-based. There are standard jeeps with 3 points of health, small motorbikes that only have 1 health point but can travel much greater distances, and support vehicles that attempt to escape the battlefield. Those support cars need to be destroyed before the others, otherwise they can get away and cause you to lose out on the high value scrap, cargo, or card rewards you would have gained by destroying it. Then there are bosses. As you would expect, bosses have far more health, deal considerably more damage, and possess unique abilities. They can also move much further around the battlefield and are completely immune to the mortar's displacement effect due to the drivers of these vehicles being uber badasses. There may be considerably more enemy types later, but after around 2 hours, those are the main ones I've encountered. Wait, no, that's a lie. There was one that was basically my mortar but on 4 wheels. He was pretty cool too, and he had more health. But unfortunately for him, train beats car. Even with that relatively small selection, the interaction between enemy movement, mortar positioning, shields, ramming, and carriage placement makes each turn more interesting than simply playing the card with the largest damage number. Instead of quite a lot of games in this genre, you're not controlling a group of soldiers. You're controlling an enormous mechanical centipede travelling along one narrow piece of railway, whilst every armed vehicle in the apocalypse attempts to merge with it at high speed. And it is awesome. Winning a battle rewards you with scrap, which serves as the main currency during a run. You can spend it at safe areas to upgrade your existing train carriages, or use it to purchase new cards from the shops scattered across the map. After larger battles, and whenever you reach a safe station, you're given several options. You can repair one carriage, restore the entire train, sell unwanted carts, buy new ones, or accept a cargo delivery contract. Cargo is effectively Fogpiercer's version of an optional side mission. You attach the shipment to your train, carry it to the next safe station, and receive a healthy pile of extra scrap when it arrives. Very straightforward. Humanity may be trapped in a post-apocalyptic wasteland behind an enormous fog wall, but Amazon still expects that parcel to be delivered by Tuesday. Naturally, there is a catch. Accepting cargo adds dedicated cargo cards directly into your battle deck. Most of these cards cannot actually be played, meaning they simply occupy space in your hand and reduce the number of useful tactical options you have available during a turn. It's like having an unexpected visit from a friend. You'll accept them into your home, but you're waiting for the opportunity to tell them to go back to their home. Cargo therefore becomes a proper risk versus reward decision. You're accepting a future payment in exchange for making every battle along the way more difficult. More valuable delivery contracts introduce hazardous cargo, which can actively apply negative modifiers during combat. Yeah, driving an armoured train through an apocalypse wasn't dangerous enough, so I also agreed to transport a container filled with unstable industrial waste because the man at the station offered me 12 scrap and called me handsome. I really like this system because the reward is simple enough to understand, but the punishment directly affects the central deck building mechanics. I'd rather something like this than the simple, you have a little less health this run idea. It's also very worth it for the scrap. Outside individual expeditions, Fogpiercer also includes permanent progression like all good games. You earn XP between runs, complete challenges to unlock new conductors and train carriages, and you will finish missions that reward you with nails. These nails can then be spent on new cards and permanent upgrades that become available during future attempts. The difficulty, meanwhile, feels pretty well balanced so far. Individual encounters can become harder because of larger enemy groups, more dangerous vehicles, or awkward battlefield layouts, but certain maps also include environmental hazards that you can use against them. As you travel deeper into a run, more enemies appear and the stronger vehicles begin becoming considerably more common. But I haven't encountered anything that felt outrageously unfair. How difficult you find Fogpiercer will probably depend heavily on your experience with strategy games. Someone who regularly plays deck builders may immediately recognise the value of cycling cards, preserving AP, and planning several turns ahead. Someone like me sees a mortar card and begins making explosion noises with his mouth. As for variety, runs currently remain fairly similar. You travel through comparable zones, encounter many of the same vehicle types, and gradually become more familiar with the situations the game can generate. But as I mentioned in my Tears of Metal review, the repetition isn't automatically a problem in a roguelike. Part of the appeal is learning the patterns. You begin recognizing encounters, understanding which routes are dangerous, and completing familiar battles more efficiently because you know how everything works. Your first journey through a zone might involve 15 minutes of deep tactical consideration. By the 5th attempt, you see the same group of bandits and immediately think, oh, it's these dickheads again. The different cards, cargo penalties, route choices, and train configurations provide enough variation that repeating an area doesn't necessarily mean repeating the exact same strategy. But this is something I'll still need to reassess after playing considerably more. 2 hours is enough to recognise the central systems, but it isn't enough to determine whether the game remains varied after 10 or 20. Visually though, Fogpiercer is fantastic. The artwork was the entire reason I clicked on the game, and thankfully, the actual experience maintains the quality of that first thumbnail. The bold, stylised vehicles, snowy environments, gorgeous explosions, and illustrated character designs give the game an identity immediately. And you can already see that in the background footage, so I don't need to spend 15 minutes describing colours to people who are currently using their eyes. What you can't experience through background footage though is the sound design, and that is also excellent. Everything feels weighty without becoming absurdly overblown. Mortar impacts have a satisfying punch, collisions sound appropriately violent, and every explosion carries enough force to validate your decisions. The developers clearly understand that when several tons of metal crash into one another, the sound should not resemble someone dropping a saucepan in the kitchen. That sounded pretty damn expensive. Performance has generally been fine, but I have encountered one incredibly persistent issue. Every time I open Fogpiercer, the game window glitches and I have to reset my video settings. Every single time. I change the settings, close the menu, and everything works perfectly. Then I return the next day, and Fogpiercer behaves as though we've never met. But as far as broader criticisms go, I'm hesitant to pretend I'm an authority on deck builders. I enjoy the occasional strategy game, but I haven't spent 6,000 hours studying the sacred mathematics of card efficiency. So there may be systems that I'm currently under or overestimating, and there may be, and most certainly actually will be, a lot of stuff that I think is good that fans of the genre will think is bad, or vice versa. That being said, the minigun is a bit shit. I was excited when I first saw it. It's a minigun attached to a train, but compared with the mortar and the possibilities created by forcing enemies around the battlefield, the minigun feels far less interesting. The mortar can trigger collisions, control positioning, push vehicles into hazards, and create chain reactions. The minigun, on the other hand, fires one shot at a specific enemy, dealing 1 damage, causing no movement, and has much less range. I understand that direct, reliable damage has value. I'm sure someone who has a larger strategic portion of their brain could explain why this carriage is secretly the foundation of an unstoppable build. But the mortar lets me recreate a motorway pile-up on command. There is no competition. I had also hoped that the train carriages available in the early station would be randomised, but I suppose they will be, maybe, once I unlock more and more carriages. I still think it would have been nice to have lots more options and have a randomised armoury each run. Offering a random selection of starting carriages could make the opening of each expedition feel more distinct and would encourage players to experiment immediately. Something I've not mentioned is, obviously, as you expand your train, you have less area to move around in. Considering you can only move forwards and backwards in a straight grid, adding another car means one extra space is taken up in that grid. Anyway, with that small criticism in mind, the game is still very fun, and very intriguing. You fight, earn scrap, modify the train, gradually develop a collection of carriages and cards, and survive increasingly dangerous encounters. Then something goes wrong. The engine explodes and you begin again with slightly more knowledge and several new reasons to hate the minigun. In short, it's as you would expect from this type of game, but with the added intrigue of the way the combat works, I just felt like talking about it for a bit. I would definitely recommend the game, especially if you're already interested in it or the genre. But if you have Game Pass and feel like trying a new game, go for it, it's super cool. If you're uninterested, I'd still say give it a shot, but who am I to tell you what to do? Also, it's only 18 quid. I mean, I didn't pay for it, and I probably wouldn't have paid for it if that was my only option, but I also wouldn't go out of my way to play something in this genre unless it was part of Game Pass or PS Plus or whatever. However, if I did love the genre, I think 18 quid is 100% justifiable and reasonable for Fogpiercer. And there we go, there's another short, easy review out of the way. Done and dusted. I've been meaning to say, for a very, very long time, I have a second channel now. I have pretty much not promoted it at all, apart from in a few descriptions of other videos. So, if you want to watch a playthrough rather than an essay or funny moments or whatever, go and head to the second channel, because that is where most of my playthroughs are going to be. There still might be a few that come out onto this channel if it's a shorter game, or if it's a game that means a lot to me, or possibly most horror games. That's all I really wanted to say. Go subscribe to the second channel if you're interested in that. Even if you're not interested in that, do it anyway, because that would be very, very helpful. And I will see you all in whatever the next video may be. Goodbye.